Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, is Mr. Joe Clark, and we're going to talk about three of the biggest Steelers-related topics of the week. Of course, that is TJ Watt, the latest on what's happening with his contract extension and what some of the league insiders are saying about it. And we're going to dive into a discussion on the Steelers' pass game, and I'm going to have Joe make some projections. I don't know if any of you watched the most recent 2 episodes of the Terrible Podcast, but I did my projections with Dave on Friday, and then Alex did his with Dave on Monday. And so now I'm going to have Joe walk through that exercise because I found it pretty interesting. And then we're going to wrap things up talking about Justin Simmons and maybe other spots we'd like to see this team upgrade between now and the start of the season. Before we dive in, Joe, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
Yeah, I can't complain. The last, 8 days until the craziness of training camp and getting the last little bit of rest in here and there because it is quite exhausting time of year for us, but an exciting time nonetheless. But I think we'll just dive right in on TJ Watt here. There's some, I don't want to say conflicting reports, but 2 different ESPN insiders gave their take on what's holding things up and what's kind of the primary sticking point in that contract talk. And Adam Schefter this morning said that the length of the deal is the holdup. And yesterday, Jeremy Fowler said that the guarantees are the holdup. And now I think they were kind of getting at the same thing because Schefter did say that the length of the deal then usually affects how many of those years ends up being guaranteed. And so more or less, they're getting at the same thing, and both Schefter and Fowler were striking an optimistic tone, thinking it would eventually get done, but Schefter did note 2 sides are still not close on the deal. We keep hearing they're not close, Joe. We keep hearing that everyone seems optimistic. At what point do we stop being optimistic, or at what point do we start panicking a little?
I think if he goes into week 1 without a new contract is really the time to start panicking. I'm just not really particularly all that concerned. Every insider has, as you said, stated continual optimism. I mean, last time this thing went down until the very end of training camp, or very end of the right up until week 1, the end of camp, and I just think that the Steelers know how valuable Watt is to them. I don't think Watt really, in his heart of hearts, wants to leave. And one side will end up caving. It'll probably end up being the team, and Watt's going to get a new deal. That's kind of the position I have right now. So unless week 1 against the Jets comes and goes and Watt's still unsigned, I'm not really going to be too panicked.
Yeah, it is interesting. I wonder if it will. I mean, somebody will have to cave. Maybe both will have to cave in certain regards. I mean, the Steelers have leverage in my mind, quite a bit of it actually, just if nothing else, because I mean, Hendrickson's been out on the market trying to get traded for much longer. Not saying that Watt is trying to get traded, but if he were to get to that point, Hendrickson's been out there trying to get traded and get a new contract, and he seems to be asking for less. I don't think Hendrickson's going to be a guy to reset the market over a Myles Garrett at 40, 41, whatever $million per season. And so how many teams can even make that kind of trade at this point in the process? The teams that would be going all in on a guy who's turning 31 this year probably aren't the same teams that have the cap space to be doing so. And so what kind of leverage does Watt really have, other than just in the past, the Steelers have done the whole we want volunteers, not hostages thing? I don't really see Watt having the most leverage, other than, of course, his wonderful, amazing stats over the last however many years, really. So I don't know if it's going to be the Steelers who cave. I think it might end up having to be TJ Watt that caves in some regards. And what does that mean? Does that mean he's, has to take slightly less guarantees on that year 3? Last time around, they gave him the signing bonus, and then they guaranteed, not fully, but they had guarantees in the next 2 years. The Steelers really tried to shy away from that for non-quarterbacks, and Watt was kind of the exception to that rule. And so, is the team going to be able to do a shorter contract? That seems to be what Schefter's hinting at, what the Steelers want. Maybe instead of a 4-year extension, they're trying to give him a 3-year extension. Joe, do you see this pretty much ending up being? I know Dave Bryan kind of put out in our chat today, put out his contract projection. It seems like he's leaning towards basically a similar deal to last time, just adjusted up for inflation, if you will. Is that kind of how you see this thing going?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think Watt's gonna end up getting what he wants and slightly beating Garrett. But given what he got last time, I think that's basically, what we're looking at here. So, I do think that will be the case.
Yeah, if you're Watt, you have to be looking at this as possibly his last contract in the NFL. If he gets another 4-year extension, he'd be under contract through his age 35 season. And at that point, probably not going to be playing much longer. Maybe he goes and does a 1-year deal somewhere. Maybe he stays. I mean, at that point, most likely not. History would say most likely not. And so if you're Watt, you want to make sure you have guarantees on that contract to make sure that you're not having to make some, late career changes. A lot of people don't want to go play elsewhere for their last year or last 2 years because, they have a home in Pittsburgh and they've kind of made their life in Pittsburgh. And now Watt has children. They won't be in school yet by that time. Well, I mean, I guess kindergarten will be coming around that time, so maybe. But you get the point. I think Watt just wants to make sure that the Steelers are committed to him, and I think he has the right to do so because he certainly has been the face of the franchise. So I don't know. Are you expecting him to hold out? And will that? You already kind of said you're not concerned until week 1, really. But give a percent right now. What percent concerned are you right now? And what percent might that be if he doesn't show up to training camp?
I'm 10% right now, and if he does a true holdout, I'll go up to 30%.
Okay, that's fair. I think I really just can't see him being traded, and the Steelers aren't going to cut him. He's under contract for another year. Watt's not going to hold out a whole season. So what are the other options? I mean, I probably agree with you by and large there. So Mark Cabali said something interesting though in terms of the Steelers haven't really negotiated with people who don't show up a ton in the past. I think maybe there's one example out there. Maybe I think Hines Ward, maybe way back when. I can't exactly remember, but by and large, the Steelers do not negotiate with those guys who hold out of training camp. It hasn't happened that many times in team history anyways, but Cabali thinks that the Steelers won't budge on that and basically won't negotiate if he doesn't show up. And so could that start to get ugly? And could that, right away, if he doesn't show up, 30%, but could that open the door to things getting ugly? And if things get ugly, where could things go from there? I could see that. I mean, do you think things are going to get ugly at all?
Yeah, I mean that's why my concern level would rise just a little bit because if Watt really does it, if Watt really gets upset that the team's not negotiating, if the team's really upset that he's not there, that's when maybe this thing gets to the point of no return. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's going to get there yet, but they've been far apart pretty much this entire offseason from all the reports. And then, if there's kind of a spark there, if he doesn't show up and the negotiations just kind of end and the talks end, I think that's where things could maybe get inflamed to be a little too much. I still don't think there's a super high chance of that happening at all, but it's certainly much more of a possibility if he doesn't show up. So that's where I think it can get a little bit concerning. So, I mean, wouldn't put high odds on it, but definitely realistic.
Yeah, and for those of you hoping for a trade, I think we've already discussed why that's not likely, but I think, Mark Cabali said that the Steelers have not made any calls. Maybe there's been some calls made to them. I think some reports have stated that in the past, but that's normal. I mean, GMs are talking all the time, and you can't really, if you're Omar Khan and you pick the phone up, you don't know that someone's calling about Watt. So sure, maybe he's heard some teams inquire, but that's standard due diligence, if you will, and nothing really to report home about. So I think that's everything on TJ Watt. And, really at this point, it's 8 days from now. We'll see if he reports to camp, and then that'll kind of renew the conversations on what's going on with Watt. All right, we're going to move into our pass game projections here with Joe. And I found this exercise very interesting because, I don't want to kind of ruin how this unfolds for you, but we're going to go through and you're going to give an initial Aaron Rodgers projection. That's yards, completions, and touchdowns. We won't get into the interceptions and all of that, but we're going to give an initial Aaron Rodgers projection. We're going to walk through the wide receivers, the running backs, and finally the tight ends, and then we'll see how those numbers line up. I'll kind of keep track along the way, and then we'll talk about some of our learnings from doing this exercise because I found it pretty eye-opening when I went through it. Joe, we'll start you off on Aaron Rodgers, completions, passing yards, and touchdowns.
So for Rodgers, I had 357 completions, 4,109 yards, and 30 touchdowns.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. I think that is... I'll give my numbers here at the end, so I don't want to influence you at all. So we'll just move right on along to the wide receivers. First of all, let's go down the list of who are the Steelers' top 5 receivers in your mind and try to get that in order, and then we will get the numbers for those.
Yeah, so I gave top 5 in order. I put DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin III, Robert Woods, Roman Wilson, and Ben Skoranek.
Ooh. Robert Woods over Roman Wilson in production.
I did have him a little over Roman. I think Roman's too much of an unknown to project a lot out of him this season right now. So very, very tepid in my expectations here.
Fair enough. I had the opposite there, but I get where you're coming from. And we'll go ahead through those numbers. DK Metcalf.
71 receptions, 1,195 yards, and 7 touchdowns.
All right, Calvin Austin III.
48 receptions, 715 yards, and 5 touchdowns.
Okay, Roman Wilson.
For Roman Wilson, I had 26 receptions, 221 yards.
No touchdowns.
I did not have any touchdowns.
Oh, did I say Roman Wilson there first? Sorry.
Yes.
Let me move these numbers here. That was an unexpected one for me, so we're already off to a start here. Robert Woods.
30 receptions, 318 yards, 2 touchdowns.
30 receptions.
318 yards and 2 touchdowns.
And 2. Okay. And finally, Ben Skoranek. Is that who you had fifth?
Yep. I had 17 receptions, 178 yards.
Okay. And no touchdowns. Okay. Running backs, and we'll just kind of do these in total because I don't want to get too in the weeds of Warren and Gainwell and Caleb Johnson.
Okay, good. Because I originally wrote down their rushing yards, so I was on the fly trying to put together what each of them would do reception-wise. So out of the running back room, in total, I think I'll go...
This is receptions. You said not rushing yards.
Yeah. I originally wrote down rushing yards by mistake, so that's why I was going back and now going through what I would calculate for the receptions. I will go 70 receptions, 600 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Okay, and so let's just pause here for a moment and talk about where we're at with the receptions and how many we have left to go around for the tight ends, because this is where it got interesting for me when I went through this with Dave, is because you add up what you think for the receivers, you add up what you think for the running backs, and you know, I think there's some pretty high expectations for the tight ends in general this year, and so when I went through this exercise, I found myself going, oh, wow, I have like 800 yards to go around for these 3 tight ends. And certainly I expect, you know, one of them to get maybe potentially close to that figure if, you know, so I kind of found myself running out of yards to work with. And so I ended up having to adjust Aaron Rodgers' projections up from where I initially had them and maybe tweak some of the wide receivers down. And so let's just add up where you're at now. Right at this moment, you've got 262 completions for Aaron Rodgers in terms of these running backs and receivers. You've got 3,227 yards, and you've got 18 touchdowns. And so that would give you, what, like basically 900 yards, 95 completions, and 12 touchdowns to work with for the tight ends. So we're going to continue on with these and just see if you run out of space like I did.
I'm definitely going to run out of a little bit of space here.
Pat Freiermuth. Or, well, actually, hang on. Do you have Pat Freiermuth first?
I do have Pat
Freiermuth.
I have Pat Freiermuth first, Jonnu Smith second, Darnell Washington third.
Okay, all right. We're on the same page there. Go ahead with Freiermuth.
Freiermuth had 68 receptions, 811 yards, and 6 touchdowns.
Okay. Jonnu Smith.
37 receptions, 419 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Okay. And finally, Darnell Washington.
21 receptions, 210 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Okay. So let me just quickly crunch these together. Okay, so the receptions have come out to, or the completions for Aaron Rodgers. Your initial projection was 357. We are now up to 388. We've tacked on 31 completions to Aaron Rodgers, which is, what, an extra, you bumped him up 10%, more or less, it seems like there. The yard total, we have progressed to... we are up to 4,667.
Oh, geez.
Quite a few yards.
I think I might have to adjust these projections.
Yes, and so this is what Dave kind of backed me into a corner on Friday's episode, and this is why I found it interesting because, yeah, I don't think, if you look at these players, player for player, and just kind of, I don't disagree with any of your numbers right off the bat, just looking at it, off the top. But when you put it together, you do end up with a Aaron Rodgers MVP type of campaign. And do we really think that is what is going to happen? The touchdowns, you ended up with 32, so you only barely overshot those touchdowns. Let me just make sure my math was correct here on some of these. Yeah, 4,667 yards. So we have a differential of 600, or we have a differential of, what is that, 126 completions. No. Sorry. It was 31 completions. 31 completions. Yes. Sorry. I lost track of my numbers here. It was like 558 passing yards and then just 2 touchdowns. So that's where we have to figure out who's not getting their share. And so I'm not going to guide you here. If you just had to make, because, yeah, you can tweak everybody down just a little bit and maybe adjust kind of across the board. But if you had to point to 1 or 2 players that you maybe have to revisit, what would that be? And maybe it's adjusting Aaron Rodgers up.
I think I would tweak down the running back room if I looked more into what I think Warren, Gainwell, and Johnson as a trio will do. I think I probably gave Gainwell a bit of a bump there, and I split the difference between Jaylen Warren's 2023 and 2024 season as a pass catcher. And I think, expecting close, I think I had like 45 receptions for Jaylen Warren, which might be a little bit high given that they have Gainwell and they have Caleb Johnson now. So I think the running back room is the first spot I would look to adjust. And after that, it would probably just be, like Robert Woods. Is he really going to pull in 30 receptions this season? Like, I think he certainly could, but is there going to be a little bit of more of a bump for Roman? Is there going to be less for Skoranek? So just kind of that 3 through 5 receiver room, kind of what that would look like there. But I would definitely tweak the running backs first.
Okay, so tweak the running backs. Let me just read off last year's numbers for the Steelers running backs. In total, you had 74 receptions between Warren and Harris, and then you tack on Cordell Patterson's 12. So that's 86 receptions last year. The yards being 593 plus 80. So that's what, 673. 673 on the yards there. And so I'm not saying you're right or wrong there, but just based off last year, that would be a decrease. And I think even looking at Breece Hall from last year, he had quite a bit of receptions there from Aaron Rodgers. And so, yeah, running backs might be the easy option, but I think when you really look at it, you have to start to adjust down some of these, and, you know, at the top of the list, starting with even, this is my thought process at least, DK Metcalf. Is he going to have that big of a season? Calvin Austin III, is he going to have that big of a season? Pat Freiermuth. Which of those three players are you the most confident in of your selections?
Of what I currently have, that's interesting because I do like Calvin Austin the third projection there. I mean, I think I kind of went a little overzealous a little bit with Freiermuth. I think he's gonna have a pretty solid year. But I think I'm probably the least confident in Freiermuth, but I might be the most confident in my Calvin Austin the third one there. That's like a 13 reception bump, uh, a little less than I think 200 more yards, and then the 5 touchdowns I'm comfortable with. So I think I'm probably most confident in that one out of those three.
Okay, I like that. I think he's due for a bump up, and I mean, by all accounts, he seems to be having a good offseason. I think Peter Schrager this morning named him as one of his top 5 breakout candidates in the whole league. We're not just talking receivers, we're talking about the entire league. He named some quarterbacks in there as well, and so I think the expectations for Calvin Austin is to take a step up, and that would be a reasonable step up from last year, and so I tend to agree, but so that comes at the expense of Freiermuth or DK Metcalf. How confident are you that Metcalf reaches 1,200? I'll tell you, when I started, I think I had 75 receptions for, I think it was 1,100 yards for Metcalf in mind, and I ended up having to adjust him down. I ended up down to 70 for 950, so let's just do a simple over-under 1,000 yards for him receiving, and keep in mind his career stats in receiving yards. He's gone over 1,000 3 times. He's gone under 1,000 3 times, and so that is a reasonable number for him. And keep in mind, he's always had Tyler Lockett opposite him, so maybe a small drop-off in who's opposite from him in Pittsburgh. So how confident are you looking back at that in DK Metcalf?
Not incredibly confident, given, you know, what the yardage shows. I mean, he could be closer to 950, 900, 950 yards, so I would probably look into dropping DK down a little bit for sure because I mean he's not a consistent every single year 1,000 yard threat as you said, and you have, you know, a lesser supporting cast than he's had in the past. It could be you know, more closer to one of those 900 yard seasons that he's had.
Yeah, fair. I think, yeah, I found this exercise kind of enlightening for me when Dave walked me through it, because I ended up having to bump up Aaron Rodgers. I think I started him at 3,700 passing yards, and I think it was like 26 or 27 touchdowns. I ended up bumping him up to, I don't know why I did it this way, but I was 1 yard shy of 4,000 and 30 touchdowns, just kind of barely taking the under on 4,000 passing yards. Would you take a season of, if someone told you my projection of 3,999 yards, 30 touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers, would you take that?
No, absolutely.
All right, well, I hope you found this exercise as interesting as I did. It certainly made me think about things in a new way, because you do have to fit everybody under a realistic Aaron Rodgers season. And keep in mind, we're leaving out guys like, you know, maybe a Connor Hayward, maybe a Scotty Miller, maybe the random running backs or receivers that come up for a game or two. There are other receptions to go around for some of these guys that weren't even on this list. And so it does become difficult, and it kind of makes you look at the wide receiver 2 situation in a different light. You know, if they add somebody like a Gabe Davis, I mean, how necessary is that at this point? Just looking at what all they have, because it really, just doing this exercise, it was kind of difficult to fit everybody under the Aaron Rodgers realistic projection. So anyway, I don't know if you had any other learnings, but if not, we will move on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree with you about adding another receiver. Just, I think what they have now could be good enough, but we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing.
We'll move on, and this is along the same lines. I think a lot of people think wide receiver 2 is kind of the Steelers' biggest need, and it's been that way since last offseason, really. and especially once they traded George Pickens to the Cowboys, that was renewed. But I think that the biggest need actually falls on defense, and this is as a result of another trade at safety once they shipped away Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Dolphins in exchange for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. One of the biggest names on that market that could step in and kind of fill the void, if you will, is Justin Simmons. And Simmons talked to the media last week. I think it was the Denver Post that he spoke with, and kind of explained why he's still a free agent at this point. All signs would point to somebody like him, I think he 3-time All-Pro, maybe, I don't have it up in front of me, but he's been a second-team All-Pro more than, I think it's 3 times, and then he's made the Pro Bowl a handful of times as well. And so this is a guy who could step in and, fill that free safety role and kind of maybe make Juan Thornhill a rotational player like it kind of initially seemed like he was going to be. And I was a heck of a lot more comfortable when it was that set up. I don't know about you, Joe, but what do you think of Justin Simmons, and are there any other names that you've kind of seen floating around out there on the safety market?
Yeah, I mean, Justin Simmons is the number one, I think, safety available. I would love to have him in Pittsburgh. We saw him last year against the Falcons. He still looked pretty solid, really all year there, and he was a beast in Denver. So you'd obviously, I think, be a pretty nice addition to this defense. I mean, Julian Blackmon's still out there. I think Marcus Williams is still out there, but I mean, he got benched by the Ravens. I don't have a ton of interest in him. Blackmon would kind of be interesting, but I just don't know how much the Steelers view safety as pressing to go out and get a big name like a Simmons or Blackmon. I mean, I think it would be nice if they did, but I don't know if they necessarily, because they have Thornhill, view it as a necessity to go out and get, one of the top remaining free agents available.
Well, let's talk about Juan Thornhill just a little bit here. He had 4 solid years. I don't want to say great, or maybe they were solid to good. You could call some of them good with the Kansas City Chiefs. His stats weren't anything spectacular by any means, but he was a solid starter for 4 seasons for the Chiefs as they won. Did he win 2 Super Bowls with them?
I think he did.
At least won 1. I think it was 2. And so, this is a Super Bowl winning player. He's seen the playoffs. He's seen what it takes to be a good team, a good defense. On one hand, there's that, but on the other hand, there's his last 2 years with the Browns, and he couldn't barely even keep his starting job with the Browns and did not have a very good season with them for 2 years. So, in a pinch, you could see him as a starter for a couple of games, but are you comfortable with him for 17 games?
I mean, I think no, because if you look at his career, he's been in injury risk. He was hurt all the time with the Browns. He was hurt, I think, at least a few times with Cleveland. So he's a guy that struggled to stay healthy. So I wouldn't be comfortable with him starting full time because of that. Last year, he didn't seem to be very good in Cleveland. It was lackluster. He had obviously the play that everybody's seen where he looks like he's barely running to chase down the defender. But he seems to be motivated to be in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's a team that is built to win. And as you said, he was at least solid with the Chiefs. So maybe he gets some of that fire against some of that motivation back and can kind of, have a return to form, at least as like an average starting safety in the league. But I wouldn't be comfortable relying on him for, every game of the season. So yeah, I think I would certainly be in favor of bringing in one of these free agents, but we'll see what they do. Obviously, I just don't know if that's gonna be up their alley. But we saw them do it a few years ago when they brought in Quan Alexander at linebacker. They could do it like a week into training camp if a Simmons or a Blackmon still out there. So not completely off the radar. I just think I'd be a little bit surprised.
And you could wait until cut downs, but there's always the conversation of how useful are those kinds of players who are getting cut from other NFL teams. Sometimes there are some diamonds in the rough, if you will, from the cut downs, but often that is not the case, especially if the Steelers are looking for somebody as kind of an upgrade over Thornhill, which I don't think there are too many of those kind of guys out there. Simmons would be somebody who would make Thornhill a kind of a third in the rotation, but a lot of these guys, it would be kind of debatable, especially if they enter, after camp and don't have the Steelers system down and the communication stuff and all like that. So from the Simmons perspective, he said he wanted to play for a contender and he's being picky, which begs the question, do you think he views them as a contender? I kind of have to look into his head a little bit. And But do you think that that's the case?
I think you certainly could. I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers, you have a seemingly improved offense. You just picked up Jalen Ramsey. You have a lot of guys that if you're Justin Simmons, I think you can look at that defense and think that he can help be another difference maker and help carry them into contention. So I think he would.
Yeah, I kind of came to the same conclusion. It's a reasonable assumption that you look at TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Patrick Queen, and some of these other guys, Darius Slay, Jalen Ramsey. I mean, it's a loaded defense that to me, if I was a defender, I'd be like, okay, I can be the missing piece to this potentially championship caliber defense. And then, yeah, the offense, well, I don't know how much you look at that as a player and think it's a championship caliber offense, but maybe you can be fooled into it just by looking at Aaron Rodgers and maybe somebody like a DK Metcalf at this point. So, anyways, that is all for our topics today. We do have a listener question to get to. And if you want to have a question answered, you can call our hotline and leave a voicemail. That's 412-254-3145. If I spoke too fast, that's in the show notes as well. You can actually leave a voicemail or you can text us. Just tell us your name and where you're from. We would love to get to know some of our listeners and where you're tuning in from. This one from a frequent caller. This is Brett from San Angelo.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, and I wanted to get your thoughts on I think maybe a little bit of an under-the-radar trade candidate, and that is Cole Holcomb. So, obviously, Cole Holcomb, when he was healthy 2 years ago, was clearly a starting caliber green dot kind of linebacker. And if he is healthy again from injury, then clearly he would be that caliber player or close to it again. However, with Queen and Wilson and the team having signed Harrison, you could theoretically see him as being no higher than the fourth outside linebacker on a team that doesn't play for routinely. He's way too good if healthy to cut, but way underutilized as potentially even as a third, but certainly as a fourth outside linebacker. If he is healthy, and if the Steelers remain healthy, and if there's an injury at another team where they are searching for a starting caliber veteran linebacker that can come in, this could be a situation where it's better for the Steelers to trade Holcomb and get a pick as opposed to essentially underutilizing him on the bench. And then that would allow them to keep end of the fourth and fifth linebackers who may have more value on special teams. Like I said, there's a lot of ifs in that statement. I'm not saying this is real likely, but an under-the-radar guy who could potentially at the end of training camp be traded that you'd say, wow, I didn't see that coming. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll look forward to hearing your answer.
All right, thank you, Brett, talking about Cole Holcomb, and could he be a trade candidate? I think it's a fair question. If you're looking at this roster, he is somebody who would maybe make the most sense just because you look at the positions where they have the most depth and the highest quality of players. Joe, I'll let you open this one up.
Yeah, I just don't necessarily think that they would move off Holcomb. I mean, I don't think teams are going to give up a whole lot for a guy that just missed a season and a half with a severe knee injury. So I think the value they would get for him is probably less than the value he has the potential to bring to this team. So I think I would probably be a little bit surprised if that was the case. I mean, I think right now I'd have him ahead of Malik Harrison on the depth chart. Probably have Holcomb at number 3, just based off what he showed 2 years ago. Who knows if the injury is still really slowing him down? But all reports he looked good out there when he played. So I don't think that the Steelers would move off Holcomb at this point. I just think he's going to be better than their fourth or fifth best linebacker.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, what are you going to get for him? Is a 2025 6th round pick or 7th round pick more valuable to you than the insurance that Holcomb gives you at inside linebacker? I mean, think back just to 2023. The Steelers started, what was it, 5, 6, 7, I think it was 6 or 7 inside linebackers that year. They were signing guys off the street. They were bringing guys out of retirement to fill as they had all these injuries. And so I don't think they're interested in doing that ever again. And so I like the fact that they are overstocked at some of these positions. Again, competition can only be good. You look at Holcomb's contract right now. I think he's only making $2 million base salary, and his cap number is only $3.64 million according to Over the Cap. And so this is a very cheap insurance policy. And if somebody like Patrick Queen gets hurt, you could be talking about Cole Holcomb as your starting green dot every down kind of linebacker potentially if he bounces back from his injury and actually looks good. I mean, there's potential for that, mostly because he's kind of played in that role before. I don't know how much experience Peyton Wilson really has with the green dot. College football only just started allowing the green dot this past year, and so Peyton Wilson wouldn't have gotten that experience in college, and Patrick Queen wore it all last year. Maybe he did it a little bit in practice, potentially at times, but yeah, Holcomb has experience there. Wilson doesn't. I don't think Malik Harrison probably does either. And so, yeah, you're looking at Cole Holcomb as kind of your second string every down green dot linebacker there. So for that price, I don't think that it's worth really trading him for what you'd get in return. 6th round, 7th round. I mean, this is a guy on a 1-year rental. So I like the idea overall, but I'm going to go ahead and say no. I'm out on that. And I think, Joe, you agree.
Yep, I do.
All right. Well, that is our show for today. If you have a question, please do give us a call, 412-254-3145. We're still figuring out when we're going to be doing our episodes during training camp. It might be later in the evening like we did last year, though practices are later than they were last year, so we might actually end up doing earlier in the morning. So you might get some kind of late morning, early afternoon type episodes from us next week and all throughout training camp. We will let you guys know. And the first episode during camp will probably be a bit of a surprise, but we appreciate you guys tuning in. We can't wait for camp to get underway. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't remember a training camp where it's more intriguing in terms of seeing how all these new shiny toys that the Steelers got perform for the first time. So I think we're all pretty excited about that. I'm Ross. That's Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.